From the shards of tattered dreams I rose, unwilling, tossed upon tides of pain that flowed and ebbed and left me searingly awake, and more revoltingly, alive.
Blood Omen 2 is generally regarded as the worst game in the Legacy of Kain series. It scored average reviews on release, and was not well received due to its frequent glitches, bugs, and betrayal of some of its characters. Plenty of game franchises have at least one disappointing title. For Soulsborne it's Dark Souls 2, for the Fallout series it's Fallout 76, for Mass Effect it's Andromeda, and so on. Blood Omen 2 is a game I've been critical of in the past, especially when comparing it to other entries in the series. When it comes to nostalgia, time and place can make a big difference. For many people, Blood Omen 2 was their introduction to Legacy of Kain. It was their first deep dive into a dark, atmospheric world where you were in control of a formidable blood-drinking vampire. It offered a unique cinematic experience, rarely seen in gaming before its release back in 2002. Upon doing some research into the game's development, I've since learned that Blood Omen 2 had a severe lack of funding and resources. This is backed up by art director Steve Ross, commenting, "Not my fondest memories. This project took 3 years while we built our engine from scratch. Trying to art direct this while also doing all the concept work and being a full-time environment artist, designer and UI artist nearly killed me." Ross ended up taking on a huge amount of the artistic work that should have been shared among a group of artists. It turns out the success of Soul Reaver 1 had a detrimental impact on Blood Omen 2. After Soul Reaver released to universal acclaim, most of Crystal Dynamics' budget was poured into fast-tracking Soul Reaver 2, whereas Blood Omen 2 was left with a smaller team and limited resources. The scarcity of funding led to a stagnation in development time, and as a result, the game was forced to come out a few months after Soul Reaver 2. Given its troubled history, I'm inclined to view Blood Omen 2 in a more sympathetic light. Despite its shortcomings, the game sold well enough to earn a re-release as part of Sony's Greatest Hits program. It's still played and enjoyed by people to this day, so I've decided to revisit Blood Omen 2, to play it through from start to finish, and approach the game with an open mind, before giving my honest opinion on it. Right, so immediately we're not off to a great start. After booting the game up on Steam, the main menu freezes, and the only way to move things along is by alt-tabbing. Just trying to adjust the settings is a nightmare. It looks like the game has compatibility issues with newer systems. Fortunately, I found a quick fix by the name of Re-Vamped. It's a single downloadable DLL file which can be dragged and dropped into the game's folder. The patch addresses various performance issues and crashes, and I recommend anyone wanting to play the PC version to apply this fix. I'll leave a link to the patch in the description. And voila! It works.
Tell me, Kain, are you hungry?
Yes.
I have a prisoner waiting for you down below, a thug from a local gang of criminals. He sought to murder yet another helpless victim, but he met me instead.
Spare me the moral anecdote and direct me to his throat.
Where Soul Reaver 1 and 2 focused on puzzle solving and exploration, in Blood Omen 2 the emphasis is on combat. It's primarily an action-driven game, and as such our protagonist Kain will face off against a multitude of enemies. Blood Omen 2 brings back the auto-face combat style seen in Soul Reaver. When in battle, Kain will lock on to the closest enemy, at which point you can either choose to attack or defend. Attacking is straightforward. By repeatedly hitting the action button, Kain will execute a combination of claw strikes or weapon attacks. It's simple hack and slash fighting, but what makes it more interesting is when you're forced to defend. Early on, players have the option to defend automatically or manually. In automatic mode, you just have to hold the block button and you'll be able to repel most attacks the enemy throws at you, except for some unblockable moves which you must sidestep to dodge. However, in manual defense mode, the player has to carefully time the deflections of enemy attacks, which adds a whole extra layer to the gameplay. Aside from the usual attacking and blocking, Kain can also grab his foes, hoisting them up off the ground by their necks. If near a ledge, he can throw his victims to their deaths, or he can ruthlessly decapitate an enemy if he's wielding a sword. While the combat is fine, it tends to suffer from collision detection issues. At times, I found myself knocking down an opponent, only to discover that I couldn't follow through with my attack until after the enemy was firmly back on their feet. Sometimes your blade will pass right through an NPC, other times their body will clip through a wall. These collision detection issues weren't a big deal, but it was aggravating now and then. Still, one of the best things about Blood Omen 2 is how immersive it is. It makes you feel like you're a creature of the night, hunting your prey to stay alive. For a vampire, blood is everything, and without it, Kain will die. This is emphasised by the blood loss mechanic. Over time, Kain's health bar will slowly deplete, so you're forced to seek out victims to sate the vampire's insatiable bloodthirst. It's a cool idea, made even better by the way in which Kain feeds on his enemies. Each time Kain kills a foe, he will draw out their blood by telekinetically sucking it right out of their open wounds. It's a visually satisfying experience, one I never get tired of seeing. You're encouraged to suck as much blood as possible, as there is another purple vial next to Kain's health which slowly fills. By drinking the blood of others, you'll gradually become stronger, making Kain harder to kill. This is what's called a vampire's lore, and it's effectively a means of leveling Kain up. When his lore meter maxes out, Kain will yell and glow red, increasing his blood vial and strengthening his attacks. The more creatures you drink from, the more lore you'll gain, and the more powerful you'll become. The idea is to leave no man or creature alive. In this game, the aim isn't only to survive, it's to thrive. After a while, the little blood Kain receives from civilians will no longer be enough to nourish his growth. You'll have to seek out stronger, more dangerous foes. As you play through the game, you'll soon find yourself balancing the wounds you take to the amount of blood you earn after you beat an opponent. With some fiercer monsters, it's possible to endure a couple of heavy hits and still recover the lost health from the dead creature's blood. With others, however, you'll want to kill them quickly because they'll not leave much blood for Kain to devour. On the whole, the game handles the blood management aspect well, and there's just something so wickedly delightful in getting to play as a vampire who feasts on his enemies. Besides the run-of-the-mill encounters, Kain will also come up against a number of renegade vampires. These boss battles, of which there are several, deliver variety to the gameplay. For first-time players, they can be challenging, and figuring out a strategy to defeat each boss is rewarding. By besting Kain's old acquaintances, you'll be able to gain new supernatural abilities. Though not as compelling as Raziel's ability to shift between realms, Kain's dark gifts go a long way to show how enigmatic and inhuman vampires are. One of my favourites is the jump ability, which allows Kain to leap tremendous distances. Not only is it satisfying to watch Kain hurl himself from one building to the next, it also allows the vampire to deliver a lethal strike on an unsuspecting NPC. Many of the dark gifts are designed for solving puzzles, while others are strictly combat focused. The combat gifts, such as Fury, Berserk and Immolate, are the most powerful gifts in Kain's repertoire. They can be unleashed to knock down an opponent, but only after a sufficient amount of rage has been built up by successfully defending against enemy strikes. When the rage meter reaches a certain level, Kain can counter with a frenzied assault, which may spell death for anyone unlucky to be caught in his attack. The final Immolate power you acquire is particularly devastating. It's an instant kill ability that lifts a target into the air before setting them ablaze. While the attack is awesome, it's completely overpowered and turns late game enemies into a joke. You can literally just block all of their moves until the rage meter is full and finish them off instantly with the press of a button. Originally, Immolate was supposed to cause NPCs to explode, leaving their bloody entrails on the ground, which Kain couldn't drink from. The lack of blood sucking would have effectively counterbalanced the ability to instantly slay your opponent, but it would have also introduced a new problem. By blowing up all his enemies, Kain wouldn't have sufficient lore to level up. Since the game had been designed around feeding on blood in order to grow one's strength, it was decided that Immolate shouldn't have any drawbacks. Now, I want to talk about the stealth mechanic in this game because it does feature a lot. Sometimes you'll come across a veil of mist over the landscape where Kain can blend in with the surrounding vapour and move around unnoticed. Although Kain will remain mostly invisible, standing directly in front of a human or creature is not recommended as they'll be alerted to Kain's presence. During these moments, you can sneak up on an enemy's back and perform a silent kill when a skull meter appears above the NPC's head. The animations depicting the stealth executions are great and range from snapping a highwayman's neck to slicing through a warrior priest's torso. By far the best has to be the one that lets you plunge Kain's fist deep into a victim's back before ripping their heart out. It's brutal and underscores what a monster Kain is. Although these animations are superb, there's no challenge to the stealth aspect in this game. Apparently it was worse in an earlier version of Blood Omen 2, where Kain's mist form was not restricted to foggy areas. Prior to the game's release, Kain's camouflage ability was not dependent on the surrounding environment. He could perform a stealth kill practically anywhere. Again, it seems like this is one of those abilities that had to be changed later in development, because otherwise it would break the difficulty of the game. It's unfortunate there weren't enough resources put into Blood Omen 2, as this is one area where I see significant potential for a fantastic vampire game. If Blood Omen 2 had come out a few years later, when stealth mechanics in gaming were becoming more engaging, we could have had an incredible experience embodying a vampire prowling the streets at night in search for his next meal. Just imagine if Blood Omen 2 had similar stealth action mechanics to the Arkham series, for example. In Arkham Asylum, Batman would enter areas which forced the player to hide until the right moment to risk a takedown. In these areas, there are a whole range of ways to subdue Gotham's criminal scum. The player can hang upside down from gargoyles to snatch up nearby foes, hide in floor grates to attack from below, and can even use explosive gel to bring walls down upon enemies. Here, it's all about timing and momentum, and the developers got the balance of power and vulnerability just right to give you a sense of thrill and satisfaction for your efforts. Blood Omen 2 is a victim of its time. Had the game been made in recent years with a more intricate stealth system, it might have been one of the top Legacy of Kain titles, especially in terms of gameplay. The most disappointing thing about Blood Omen 2's gameplay though is its puzzles. The puzzle solving segments are not the best. Some are okay, but many exist only to impede your progress. You see, most of the puzzles simply involve activating a bunch of switches to advance through to the next area. What's frustrating is that a few of these puzzles appear more complex than they really are. There was this one where I had to charm a bookkeeper to release a prisoner and then control that prisoner's mind to lower a ladder for Kain. The thing is, the door the prisoner opens to access the ladder switch is timed and will shut behind him. At this point, I thought I had to charm the bookkeeper again to somehow open the door for Kain, but I remembered the switch was beyond that particular NPC's reach. I then spent a good 5 to 10 minutes alternating between taking control of the prisoner and the bookkeeper, trying to figure out how to get this blasted door open. That was until by chance, I stumbled upon a second lever hidden at the end of the catwalk, which Kain could just pull to open the door. Generally, you're supposed to feel a sense of accomplishment after you solve a puzzle in a video game, but in Blood Omen 2, I rarely felt that. To sum up, the gameplay is about action, managing Kain's blood supply, and puzzle solving. It's a bit of a mixed bag, but I think there's enough charm here to keep players engaged. There's nothing quite like the feeling of playing a ruthless vampire who will stop at nothing to achieve his ambition, and in that respect, the game does well.
Restricted area. This passage is for night shift workers only.
I am the night shift.
In terms of presentation, Blood Omen 2's steampunk setting was not bad for its time. The city of Meridian is a labyrinth of dark alleyways, neglected buildings, and rat-infested sewers. It's a place dripping with gothic atmosphere that looks like it's undergone an industrial revolution. As I traversed through certain parts of the slums, I couldn't help but feel a foreboding sense of dread. The bleak environments, together with screams echoing through the night, have a way of conjuring eerie thoughts in the back of one's mind. Visually though, the graphics are a letdown. The interiors of taverns and factories have a plain look to them, and it's a shame because we know the PlayStation 2 was capable of a lot more graphics wise. The water isn't at all interesting to look at, neither is the fire, which uses very limited particle effects. However, I appreciate the effort put into the outside areas, particularly the ambient lighting around street lamps and places where there's fog. As I made my way through the game, I was pleasantly surprised by how big the levels were. The early chapters sell the idea that Meridian is a sprawling metropolis brimming with rooftops to climb and underground passages to explore. There are also levels that take you beyond the city walls, to weird and truly horrifying locations. The Eternal Prison stands out for me with its vivid depiction of self-mutilating inmates, Grim Reaper-styled wardens, and spider demons. The prison was such an inspired design choice, and its references to time, space and death were interesting. I just wish the game had the seamless world we see in Soul Reaver 1. While the first Soul Reaver is technically a linear experience, it wasn't broken down into stages, and once you were in the world, there were no loading screens. It gave you the illusion that you could go anywhere and do anything, and for a game that came out in 1999, this was a huge deal back then. If Blood Omen 2 had the same interconnectivity as Soul Reaver 1, with more secret areas to discover, I think it would have been better received. While the background graphics are hit and miss, the character models especially lack the level of detail of other Legacy of Kain titles. Most of the human NPCs appear as if they belong in a PlayStation 1 game. Their faces are ugly and their clothes are lackluster. However, Kain himself looks awesome, and his design is an improvement over his appearance in Blood Omen 1. What's not an improvement, by any stretch of the imagination, are the character models for Vorador and Janos. Going into Blood Omen 2, after finishing Soul Reaver 2, is like getting a smack in the face when you meet these two. Their models are a downgrade from their designs in the second Soul Reaver title. They appear simplistic, dull, and in the case of Janos, less angelic in comparison. It's clear Blood Omen 2 would have benefited from Soul Reaver 2's team sharing their plans and resources for these characters. Perhaps then, it wouldn't have been so jarring going from one game to the next.
No!
At last.
What living soul disturbs my order? What creature dares shed the blood of my servants?
He had the sword. Soul Reaver, the prize I had won a lifetime ago, was in his foul possession.
What is this?
You know me.
No. You were utterly destroyed so easily. Your name was drowned in the backwaters of passing time. All your plans were set alight and seared to smoke and ashes.
Let those words be your epitaph.
You dare dream of killing me? That fantasy was quenched in blood long ago when I defeated you. And yet, you have learned nothing. Such a pathetic creature. Dare you to challenge me again?
Die, fiend!
No, Kain!
Your death is fated at my hands. How many times must I teach you that lesson?
Legacy of Kain never ceases to amaze me with its fantastic voice talent. Simon Templeman, who plays Kain, is always a treat to listen to. Terrific voice acting is characterised by an actor's ability to portray a character's emotions in a way that's believable and engaging to the audience. The way Templeman delivers his lines with such enthusiasm and conviction perfectly embodies Kain's flamboyant and arrogant nature. His voice adds a layer of complexity to the character, which really captures the essence of Kain. The rest of the voice cast do a fine job, but Kain shines the greatest. The music in Blood Omen 2 works well. The ambient soundtrack helps set the game's haunting tone. When exploring the world, the music tends to evoke a feeling of melancholy, darkness, and solitude, but once you engage in combat, it speeds up and becomes dramatic. I really enjoy the main battle theme as well. It's percussion heavy and is a great fit for our unyielding vampire protagonist.
Where am I? I don't remember.
Yes, it was said your memory would be affected by your long slumber. That will pass in time. I am Uma, and I am here to help you. Know that your name is Kain, and you were once a power in the land.
I know my name, but my past, I remember fragments only.
That you awoke at all is a miracle. When we found you, there was but the barest thread of life left in you. We nurtured it, fed it, and now you rise and walk again.
And what is this place?
You are in the city of Meridian, capital of the land of Nosgoth, the land you once sought to conquer and rule. Tell me, since you remember your name, do you also remember your nature?
Of course.
Then let me show you the future. You have been asleep for 200 years. In that time, this is what has become of Nosgoth. You were a great general, commanding an army of vampires, but the powers you opposed were too strong for you. You were struck down, your armies defeated, scattered, and destroyed. Everyone believed you to be dead.
2 centuries after the events of the first Blood Omen game, Kain had built a mighty vampire army and led them south across the land in his conquest to claim all of Nosgoth. However, outside the gates of Meridian, Kain's army was confronted by the revived Sarafan Order. Their leader, the mysterious Sarafan Lord, defeated Kain in battle. Kain barely survived this encounter and ended up falling into a coma. Another 200 years pass before Kain awakens to find that his prized possession, the Soul Reaver, had been taken. With the help of the vampires who had protected him during his recovery, Kain sets off on a new quest to continue his ascent to power, reclaim the Soul Reaver, and take revenge on the one who bested him. The premise of Blood Omen 2's plot isn't extraordinary or original. In fact, it can be summed up in a few short words. Kain was defeated in battle, and now he wants revenge. The story is less compelling here, and there are a few blatant plot holes. For instance, more than halfway through the game, the player will meet a character known as the Builder. This character reveals the weakness of the Mass, an eldritch abomination Kain is attempting to destroy. Apparently, in order to kill the Mass, Kain must take and use the blood of one of the Elder races, which is poisonous to the creature. The problem with that is the Mass is being fed with the blood of Janos Audran, who himself is a member of an elder race. So how can the blood of the builder kill the mass, when at the same time an ancient vampire's blood is providing nourishment to the creature? It doesn't make any sense. The game also prompted the frequently asked question of how Vorador was still alive in this era after his execution in the first game. And while I've discussed theories about this in my other videos, we still don't have a definitive answer. Where Blood Omen 2's story really suffers though is in its dialogue. Apart from a few standout lines, the exchanges between characters just aren't as eloquent or engaging as the dialogue in other Legacy of Kain titles. There's less flavour to the language, and too many of the in-game discussions are about directing Kain to his next objective. In saying that, I appreciate the references to the original Blood Omen thrown in. You will find prisoners shackled to walls, begging for their lives, and it's a great nod to the first game to hear Kain laughing as he drinks their blood.
Oh, please, help me, kind sir!
I don't think it's a stretch to say Blood Omen 2's main character is the best thing about it. Kain's not heroic by any means, but he's not a complete villain either. He's sincere, he never minces his words, and he never compromises. He's unapologetic about what he wants, and he does whatever's best for him, regardless of the consequences. This makes him likeable, as well as intriguing. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on Blood Omen 2. Do you agree with my assessment of this game? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments. In my opinion, the game clearly has its flaws, but it has more than a few redeeming qualities as well. I see potential here. With more time, effort and money put in, we could have had an amazing stealth action vampire game on our hands. It just needed more fleshing out of its core gameplay mechanics, together with further thought and consideration as to how its plot would impact other games in the series. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe for more Legacy of Kain content. That's all for now. See you in the next video.